All right. So thank you everybody for joining our nutrition webinar. Today we have Sydney Enns. She is our Director of Volunteer Engagement and our Senior Center Liaison here at the Department of Disability and Aging. Many of you probably know Sydney or have talked to Sydney through her work with volunteer recruitment and our Senior Center Liaison work. She's amazing at it. Some of you had expressed interest in needing assistance with wanting to do better at volunteer recruitment and retention for our meal program. So I asked Sydney if she would be our person to talk about it since she's the expert, and she agreed. So I'm going to turn my camera off and I'm going to turn it over to Sydney and let her have at it. So thank you, Sydney. And if anybody has questions, just pop them in the chat and we will get them answered as we go along.
Awesome. Thank you, Keita. And hey, everyone, I'm actually going to turn my camera off as well because I have dual screens. So I want to feel like I want to look at you all and speak to you, but I probably won't. So just to avoid that anxiety. But as Keita mentioned, I'm Sydney Enns. I'm the Director of Volunteer Engagement and Senior Center Liaison here at DDA. Many of you may not need to recruit volunteers right away. I know that sounds crazy. By all means, if you need volunteers, please recruit, recruit, recruit. But statistically, we spend 5 times more money and time recruiting volunteers than focusing on retaining the good volunteers that we have. So this is going to be kind of a mixture of ways that we can recruit if you need some more volunteers in your program, but also some really good tips and tricks on how to retain those volunteers that you currently have. So maybe you can switch your focus or not have to recruit as much or as often with some of these retention strategies as well. So just curious, for the chat box, if you don't mind, do me a favor and type in there about how many volunteers you all currently have in your program. Whether it be, you could be a local kind of one person facility show, you could be an entire region. So if there's some big numbers that start showing up in the chat box, don't think that you're not doing a good job or anything like that. So if you do me that favor, here's the chat box, chat here, just type that in there. Let me know how many volunteers you have in your program.
Looks like we got some people typing.
Yep, not a problem. So as we're waiting for some responses, I'll let you know we have almost 12,000 volunteers across the state that work with our statewide and our regional volunteer programs. A high majority of that, I want to say at least 40% of the volunteers we have across the state are with the nutrition program. So you all are a great source of volunteerism. You all have arguably, and I know it's not from maybe your all's perspective, but one of the more attractive volunteer opportunities because people love going out and delivering meals. However, I know many of you have your programs during the week, which is hard to recruit volunteers because people are working and things of that nature. So thank you. We have 29, 500 plus. Amazing. Yeah, keep those coming in the chat. 31, perfect. Thank you all so much. So this slide right here is pretty much its own presentation, so we're not going to go super in depth on all of these. But the first thing we need to do when focusing on recruitment. So recruitment is going to be our focus kind of for the first half, and then we'll turn our focus to that retention piece. So we really need to assess our programs. And this is individually at your location, whether you're regional, local. This is also, Keita and I having those conversations at the state level and assessing the statewide program. We also, Keita and I talked that this might be a topic that we want to talk about on some of your monthly calls. So assessing your program, determining your needs. So if you're a regional office, where are the counties that you need to focus on? Or if you're in a particular city, what neighborhood do you need to recruit from? So really assessing your needs and seeing how many volunteers, where those volunteer target areas are that you need to be able to accommodate the people that we serve. Analyzing workspace. This one's an interesting one for your all's program because a lot of the volunteers' workspace is their vehicle, right? They're driving to and from the client's house. Maybe it's the kitchen area or the prep area, something along those lines. So analyzing the workspace. You all are likely that volunteer liaison. Or if you're the program lead and you're lucky enough to have a dedicated volunteer coordinator, might be that person. Maybe you have a volunteer who's a volunteer coordinator, or that might be a volunteer role that you're interested in. But having that one designated person that volunteers can turn to and ask questions to. Prepare a budget. I get a lot of laughs when I talk about volunteer programs and a budget. What money do we have for volunteers, right? Usually that's the first thing in a budget that's cut is resources for volunteers. But if we can create a budget and we can justify that budget, just think of what we can do more with our programs if we have that little bit of funding to help either with recruitment or retention strategies. Involve board members. For some of us, it might be commission members. If you're here at the state level, it could be advisory committee or council members if you're regional, or if you're a nonprofit, it could very well be your board. But think of it as, instead of board members, kind of your management team, upper management, making sure you have that buy-in, getting them involved. If you have board members or maybe elected officials that are on an advisory committee, it's really great to get them involved, and then you can do pictures and you can do promotion of things like that, like you have your local elected official helping. Prepare your staff. You might be a one-person show. Prepare yourself, I guess. But also there's some nutrition sites, program managers who also work with a senior center director or another staff person at another like community center or senior living facility. So prepare those staff as well that, hey, volunteers are coming in. If you see a volunteer, say hi. That's what a lot of volunteers want, is just instead of them feeling like they're a stranger, make sure that other staff members know when a volunteer's coming in to just welcome them, say thank you. Those little things go a long way. Legal and safety considerations, that's that risk management piece. Everyone should have those policies in place. Not really going to touch on those because that's more legalese, and I am not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV or pretend. Screening policies, we all have those background check requirements. Applications, maybe you do interviews. Assess your program in those screening policies. And then record keeping. How are you tracking your volunteers, where they're going, who they're serving, how they're getting their meals, hours, all that good stuff, how many people we're serving. So those are all things that every year, at least, we need to kind of start assessing and evaluating to prepare to recruit volunteers into the program. Your volunteer role description is one of your key pieces to your volunteer recruitment. And the reason for that is it's going to set expectations for the new people coming into your program. So I want to deliver a meal and I think I'm just going to go swing by, someone's going to give me a meal and I'm going to go deliver it to my grandma because she needs a meal. That's not what the program is, right? The volunteer is going to have a meal route. So that needs to be explained so they know that it's not just picking up a meal and going to take it to whoever they want to in their local neighborhood. It's you have a meal route. We have to make sure that sanitary items are met, policies and procedures, all that good stuff that you all know that clearly I'm not as familiar with as I need to be, but setting those expectations for volunteers. This is also a good way to filter out volunteers who may not fit well in your program, who think they want to deliver a meal, but maybe I've actually had volunteers say, I want to deliver a meal, but I don't own a car. Okay. That's going to be one of the expectations of a volunteer, right? Is that they have personal transportation. So they may not fit well with that program. So even little things like that, that you think, well, this is a no-brainer. Someone who wants to deliver a meal should know they need their own personal vehicle. Kind of need to spell that out so they have that expectation set. Again, kind of reiterating the recruitment thing, this can also weed those people out. So I know we've had probably multiple trainings where we've had a great group of volunteers come in, like 20 volunteers, and then it's time to start scheduling routes, and maybe only 5 actually commit to a route. So having this volunteer role description and those expectations can weed out those people so we're not spending all that much time training those who aren't going to be committed to our programs. It's also a really good risk management tool. So this is what volunteers are expected to do. If they go and do something completely different, then they know that they're going against what the expectations are. So for example, if an expectation is you knock on the door, no volunteer should go into the home. I don't know if this is an expectation or not, but let's just for sake of example, you knock on the door and you hand deliver the meal to the individual, right? all of a sudden you're hearing complaints from clients that this volunteer is coming in to the home and then leaving with, a bottle of water out of the refrigerator or something along those lines. So having the expectations in this role description will help prevent that risk management. And if there are issues, you can go to that volunteer and say, hey, this is what you signed on that you were going to do. You're going beyond the expectations and we're getting into some risk management. We need to fix this. And if you can't fix it, then we need to remove you from the program. Also, it helps to get everything in writing. I always love to get conversations and follow-ups in writing. Maybe some legal individuals don't particularly care for that. But this way, if there is an issue, again, you have it in writing that the volunteer agreed to do this, this, and this. And if they're not doing it right, they're not doing it correctly, and you've worked with them on correcting some inaccurate behavior, that they know what their expectations are. And then last, it's going to save you time, again, weeding out those volunteers who might not fit well in the program. So does everyone have a volunteer role description? Either raise your hand, give me a reaction of a thumbs up. I hope we all do. I want to see some thumbs up. I want to see yeses. All right. There we go. We got a yes. Thank you. If you don't, this might be something that we create as a statewide tool, potentially. So that way you all have something that you can model. But common elements of a volunteer role description. I have an example here on the screen, and then here's kind of your categories. The biggest thing that you want to make sure you have is a title. Volunteers love their titles. It's interesting, volunteers don't like to be called volunteers. So if you can come up with a fun, catchy title for your volunteer, that might actually help you attract and recruit more volunteers, especially of a younger generation potentially. So I know one of our programs was, we don't have funding for it anymore, unfortunately, was the Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program. So they did music playlists for older adults. Instead of saying Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program volunteer, first of all, mouthful, they brainstormed and their volunteers were called music managers. We're in Music City. That's awesome. We call our volunteers motivators. Perfectly. Perfect. Love it. Something along those lines, a little bit catchy. Get your volunteers' input. What do you want to be called? And see if you can brainstorm some fun things. Duties and responsibilities are key. Again, this is what we literally just talked about, setting those expectations so volunteers know what to do. Time commitment is also a really good thing to put in your role description. It'll help volunteer longevity. So if you're like, hey, whenever you can deliver a meal, that's great. Being more flexible, which is always a good thing. But if you put in like a length of appointment or time commitment, we would like you to do one meal route every other week, or one real meal, ooh, wow, words, 1 or 2 meal routes a month. Like setting that expectation that we do want this to be a fairly consistent thing. If you wanted to up it, 1 meal route a week. Kind of figure out what your volunteers are currently doing, what the capacity is, and what you need. Again, going back to that, assessing your program. Skills, benefits, all those good things are things you can consider putting into your volunteer role description. Benefits, some programs might say after you volunteer and deliver 20 meals, you get a t-shirt. Or every quarter you can submit mileage reimbursement. So, gas prices are up. Some volunteers might really appreciate getting that small mileage reimbursement check if that's something that your organization is able to do. But adding those benefits in, even if it's small, a benefit of adding this to your resume, could really help that college volunteer want to volunteer for the program. And Keita just mentioned meal volunteers are eligible to receive a meal when they are volunteering. Absolutely, that is a perfect benefit. Not only do you deliver a meal, but we'll feed you in the process. They always say, if you feed me, I'll come. Just like the Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Well, if you feed volunteers, they will show up. So some strategies on how to recruit volunteers. These are probably some that you've heard of quite a bit. So word of mouth, this is going to be your most powerful tool, hands down. Whether it be you or your volunteers themselves or someone, word of mouth is how you get volunteers. The most common reason why people don't volunteer, does anybody know? Keita probably does because she hears me talking about this all the time. But the number one reason volunteers don't volunteer is because you don't ask them. They're not asked to volunteer. Yet they may not know about the program, but if I went to Keita, and I've done this many, many times, hey, Keita, I need you to help volunteer with me at Special Olympics volleyball because it's really going to help the athletes. And then I guilt her into volunteering with me. So if you have someone that comes into the program, or you're at your local church or anywhere that you're at, hey, what are you doing during the week? Do you want to deliver a meal? We really need people to help out with that. And Keita confirmed that yes, I do ask her to volunteer a lot. But least expensive and most effective way to recruit volunteers is by word of mouth. Volunteer board members, staff, all of them can be ambassadors. I'm going to talk about volunteer ambassador program here in a little bit, but these are going to be your sounding boards. You're not in this alone. You're not the only ones who can recruit volunteers for your program. I know a lot of us feel like that's our responsibility. It's our job as the program coordinator or volunteer coordinator or whatever your title might be, that it's your job to recruit volunteers. Get yourself some help. Volunteers, board, staff, you have so many people around you that can help you recruit volunteers. Go to your local speaking venues. Anytime someone in your organization is speaking to the public, there should always be a call to action after that presentation for volunteers. Keita's going to talk about nutrition somewhere. At the end of her presentation, she'll list out the volunteer opportunities that we have across the state. Just putting that out there for anyone to be able to have just a snippet of information that thank you for being here. If you want to get more involved, here's some volunteer opportunities that we have. And then one idea I've always wanted to do, and I was planning on doing it in 2020, and then, well, the world shut down, is I've always wanted to do a volunteer-a-thon. This is where you ask your current volunteers to bring one or two people that they think would really be great in the program, and have like a 1 hour orientation about what the nutrition program is. So it's almost like an open house. So you're getting the volunteers involved. They're bringing in people that they trust. You trust the volunteer, right? Hopefully, fingers crossed. So you already know that you may not get every person who comes to that volunteer-a-thon, but you got a good shot because the volunteer is their friend, their family member. They're doing it. So already it's going to be like this is probably something that I might be interested in doing as well. Or they can do it together. And then that just brings more and more people in. And again, the volunteer-a-thon, it doesn't have to be an all-day thing. It might be a 1 hour meet and greet. You have maybe a 30-minute conversation or little presentation, not conversation, but have your president of the board, have your executive director, have a volunteer come and speak and do their testimonial about why they volunteer. And it's just kind of one of those really great events. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. Anybody want to do it? I will help them put this on. I really want this to happen. But just kind of a good way to get everyone involved in volunteer recruitment. And it is word of mouth. Hey, I want you to come to this meeting. I know many of you probably do this already, but look at your schools and colleges, especially our high school students, our seniors or upperclassmen. They need those community service hours. College students sometimes need community service hours. Some may call this being voluntold to come and help. But if we can frame why our programs are important and really get the buy-in of these students, it's not going to be like a burden on them to come and deliver a meal. They're going to feel a passion for it. They're going to feel invested. Internships. There's a lot that we can do with a student intern who needs 1 to 400 hours, right? It doesn't have to be that they're doing a meal route every day. You don't have a volunteer coordinator right now, get an intern. They're going to be your volunteer coordinator. Build us up a volunteer program. Do a recruitment plan. Get some of your friends. Really using those interns as, of course, everyone might have to do a meal route if some volunteers may back out. Emergencies happen, right? People get sick. So yeah, they'll deliver meals. You want them to have that experience working with the clientele, but they could also help you on the back end develop some things that you might not have had time necessarily to develop on your own because you're doing literally everything else. Sororities and fraternities. Not only in colleges, but you have the sorority and fraternity. I'm thinking of like the people who've graduated who stay in the fraternity Oh, help me out. Hopefully you all know what I'm talking about. Um, but they do a lot of alumni. Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to find out. The alumni sororities and fraternities. They're always looking for local community organizations to volunteer with. A lot of them are retired potentially, so they might be really good fits. And then we also have our Tennessee Promise students who are more within the high school community service realm, but they're students who are required. So if you have a local Tennessee Promise program, usually some high schools will have that as an option. You may want to reach out to your local school systems to see if there's any students that want to do their Promise hours with you all. Service clubs, there's a lot of those in our communities. Some may have all, some may have some. So like your Lions clubs, Kiwanuses, Elks, VFWs, a lot of these individuals are retired. And again, looking for local community organizations to give back to. So they'll be kind of serving their peers. I've done quite a few presentations back in the day to all of these organizations, and usually after a presentation, I'll get at least 4 or 5 that will look into more information. Maybe not volunteer, but want more information to see how they could potentially get involved. Faith-based organizations. I will say with faith-based, it's easier said than done because you have to have an in with a lot of our faith-based organizations. And if you don't, it might not be as easy to, get that meeting and speak to the congregation. But generally speaking, faith-based organizations have that service first mentality, right? They want to serve the community. They want to be sure to provide those resources. Volunteers and other staff may have those connections that you don't. And a lot of us, we don't talk with our volunteers about necessarily what they're involved in the community. So maybe they are heavily involved in church, and instead of you going to talk to the congregation or a smaller, maybe adult ministry or a service ministry, they can do that for you. And then you might be able to get some volunteers from that faith-based organization through those connections. Again, using that network that's around you so you don't have to necessarily do everything. Media, quite a few media options. Public service announcements generally are free. Maybe not everybody has one of those on the radio, but usually on the radio station websites, they have public service announcements that you can type in, and whenever they have some free airtime, they can do a promotion for you. Featured articles. If your elected officials going out and delivering a meal, make sure the news is covering it. Or if you have a group from the church, or you have the Tennessee Promise students, or a sorority, or whoever, those groups are, see if you can get the local newspaper out there, take some pictures, do an article, and get some publicity, not only about the program, but then also add, hey, we're always looking for volunteers, or we really need volunteers in Pickett County, or whatever county that you're in. TV news segments as well. If you're able to get that news media outlet out there. And then press releases. So we have quite a few drafted press releases available, like samples, templates type things. Those are another thing that typically, like the press release and the public service announcement, kind of go together, to where if you have something already typed up, it's easy to kind of transfer into maybe a public service announcement or add that to Chamber of Commerce, things of that nature. Especially if you're going to target our older adult retirees, they're still getting newspapers, right? They're still listening to the radio. They're still watching the news. If you want to target that population, the media is potentially a good way to go. And then we have our online resources. Your website is going to be the first and most prominent way a volunteer is going to get introduced to your program. So they're going to look on your website and they're going to see where's volunteer opportunities at. Can't find them? Well, moving on to the next place to volunteer for. I know many of you know that we've merged with another department, so we're brand new. And we were looking at the website, and our volunteer information on the DDA website isn't as prominent as what it was previously. So we're working with our website team to get that more prominent on our website to see if we can recruit more volunteers. So it's always good to look back at your website, making sure that information's there. Have your volunteer role description up there. If you have a video or you have pictures of volunteers delivering meals, make sure that's on your website, especially on your volunteer page. Same thing with social medias, if you have any of those. If you're looking for a volunteer in a particular area, Social media could be a really great way to just throw that out there. Hey, we're in need of a volunteer in Stewart County next week. If you say, I need a volunteer today, don't be surprised if you don't get a response, right? But if you ask a little bit, give people a little bit of time, give people a little bit of notice, you might see that you're going to recruit volunteers a bit more effectively than saying, I need a volunteer right now, today, to deliver at noon, and it's 10:30. Probably not going to get the best results. So that's where, again, our planning and our assessing our program will come into play to really help out with that social media recruitment. And then there's a lot of online resources. So a lot of these are nationwide. Volunteer Match is probably one of the most recognized volunteer recruitment sites in the country, again, nationwide. Tennessee Serves Network is the premier, or main, I shouldn't say premier, but the main volunteer recruitment site for opportunities in the state of Tennessee. If you don't have a Volunteer Match or a Tennessee Serves Network profile, I encourage you all to get one. Most of our volunteers come in through our website or through our Volunteer Match site. But there's also so many other sites that you can look into. Volunteer Match, Tennessee Serves Network, all free. So you don't have to pay a membership or a license or anything like that. You can post as many opportunities as you need, take them down, put new ones up, all that good stuff at no charge. So how we recruit volunteers, I'm kind of reiterating myself a little bit on this one. Our website, Volunteer Match, and Tennessee Serves Network. So how it works when a volunteer comes into DDA. So through our website and all these different resources, those volunteers come directly to me. I do the screening, those 4 screening sites, the adult abuse, sex offender, felony offender, drug offender registry. I do those screenings. I send the information, the contact information for the volunteer and the screening to KETA, and then KETA disperses it to you all. On all of these sites, we just get the basic information. So we get the name, phone number, email, county, and then their interest. So we don't get a lot of the demographic information. We don't ask for those specific details that you all may, but there is kind of a notice that we're going to send your information to the local coordinator who may have additional information that they need from you once they contact. So we'll get you kind of started, and then you all can go through your screening processes as well. Hopefully us doing the screening will help take just that little bit of time, give you that little bit of time back so you don't have to do those screenings. If you're really behind on screenings, shoot me an email, let me know. I can help you run those screenings. I'm happy to do it if that's ever a need. I talked a little bit about volunteer ambassadors, and this is one thing that I really want to maybe focus on in the next year or two. But a volunteer ambassador is a current volunteer that has a true passion for the program. These are just like you when you go and speak to the community about the nutrition program. This is just think of a replication. Nope, that's not right. Another you, right? So you're not the only one doing those presentations. The volunteer's passionate, they've been around for a while. They have, again, those networks that we may not have. So I know I don't have very many faith-based connections, but I have a volunteer who is very heavily involved in their church and has gotten us some volunteers because of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be faith-based. It could be in those service clubs. It could be in the sororities, colleges, high schools, whatever it could be. Financial institutions, things of that nature. So our ambassadors are going to have their own networks that we might not have links to, and they can make those connections for us. Volunteer ambassadors are going to inspire the people that they recruit. Because let's face it, we're paid to say our programs are amazing, right? Yes, you are paid to say your program's great. Don't say the program's bad. But a volunteer who doesn't get paid, who has that boots on the ground experience, is really going to inspire someone that, wow, this program's really impacted them and they feel like they're doing such good work in the community. I can do that too, right? So they're going to inspire. And then from there, you also have that peer support. So if I'm a nutrition volunteer and I talk to my local church and I recruit 5 people, those 5 people are going to look to me and say, hey, I delivered to Miss Smith down the road and, she looked like she needed a little bit more support in housekeeping. Like she said, her dishes were piling up, or for something like that. Like they can talk to a peer maybe more than they would talk to a peer or a paid staff person. So they have that support, and they can talk through things, and that ambassador can really help support a new volunteer, almost like a mentor-mentee kind of relationship. So I'm working on kind of getting a bit more of guidelines on how to start a volunteer ambassador program to see if we can, again, take some stress off of our paid staff, our coordinators who think they have to go to all these meetings. If you're ever asked, hey, come speak to our group, and it's like, oh, I have 4 other presentations this week. I need to actually finish the reports that are needed or enter the data into the data system. Maybe you'll have an ambassador or two that you can say, hey, on Tuesday, are you able to do a 30-minute presentation at the library? And then you have that backup system. That sound okay? Maybe a thumbs up, heart, something in the chat. Of course, Keita's going to agree.
Yes, you're doing a great job, Sydney.
One of the key things for volunteer ambassadors is giving them talking points. You don't necessarily want someone to speak on your program and go rogue, right? So this may also be another topic that we all kind of come together and put our heads together on, is what consistent message do we want to have about the nutrition program across the state? Do we want to make sure everyone knows that it's the home delivered meal program, because not everyone has Meals on Wheels, right, as their brand. And that's everyone says, oh, you do Meals on Wheels. No, I do home delivered meals. Is that something that needs to be a talking point so we can kind of clear that up across the state? Impacts, there's things to avoid and why you want to have consistent talking points. But not only great for the volunteers, but also great for coordinators and other staff across the state. So as we look into assessing the program and seeing the needs for 2025, maybe we come up with 3 to 5 talking points that we can all agree to kind of have our message for the next year on the importance of the volunteer program in general, or maybe the importance of why people need to volunteer. So I gave you a bunch of examples of what we've done and what I've seen other programs do in terms of volunteer recruitment. What am I missing? What do you all do that I haven't mentioned that has worked for your program? Or maybe even let us know a couple things that you've done that didn't really work all that well in your area, but you never know, it could work in another area.
Y'all should be able to unmute yourselves. If not, you can always type it in the chat if you don't want to open up. But yeah, what's been some volunteer recruitment things that y'all have done that have worked amazingly or not?
Volunteer recruitment is true trial and error sometimes. Or maybe I covered everything because, like Keita said, I am the SME, subject matter expert.
I know when I was doing volunteer recruitment for the MyRad program, I thought that the churches would be like a surefire guarantee because everybody wants to help out at the church. That was my least engaged audience. Stacy says she can't unmute. I'm looking at meeting options. It's on my end.
You might need to move them because everyone's an attendee. You might have to move that person to a presenter to unmute their mic, potentially.
I don't know how to do that. Okay, so just type in the chat. Sorry, guys, I don't know how to do that.
Yay, technology.
Anyways, the churches were the least engaged in our area when I was recruiting for MyRad. So yeah, that was shocking for me. Let me see, Stacy, if I can unmute you. No?
Interesting.
Make a presenter? Stacy, I made you a presenter. Can you unmute now? Oh, well.
We tried. Good effort. A for effort. But yeah, type them into the chat box, and I'm going to move on, but I'll come back to the chat and we can talk about more recruitment options. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about retention now. So kind of what we've talked about just now is getting new people into the program. Now we're going to focus more on keeping the volunteers that we currently have. So another recruitment is using Santas for Seniors as a way to gain new volunteers. Absolutely. Um, Kind of along those notes. Um, Look at the other programs you have in your organization and talk with the other coordinators. Hey, is there any volunteers who you are seeing maybe aren't volunteering as much, or maybe they've asked to look for something different? Like, you can look to other programs to see if you can not steal volunteers. I'm not promoting that, but see if other volunteers from other programs might be interested in doing a meal route during maybe a busy time of the year, something along those lines. Okay, one of a really good way to retain volunteers is through your orientation and training. So, does anyone do an orientation for the nutrition program? Now, orientation is different from training, and we're looking at the 10,000-foot view, right? This is maybe kind of like what we were talking about with the volunteer-a-thon, just a quick 30 to 60 minutes grand overview of the program. You're not getting into the nitty-gritty. You're not talking about meal routes. You're talking about your organization, the mission, and kind of a little bit about that volunteer role description. So they know those expectations, but you're not getting into the actual training portion. Anybody do an orientation? If you don't, I strongly encourage you to consider starting one. And the orientation can be in person, it can be virtual, it could be recorded. I did a statewide program that we just recorded an orientation and asked volunteers who were interested, hey, watch this video. And after you watch the video, if you're still interested, let us know. We'll send you the application. Let's see, are asking for t-shirts so that they don't have to worry about laundry as much since they're with it every day. More residents are interested in volunteering as well. Perfect. Love that. And especially t-shirts, you feel like you're part of something, right? Like, ooh, I have my uh, home delivered meal shirt on and everyone knows who I am. Good marketing for everybody as well as they're going to the store and things. Absolutely. Okay. But orientation is a really good way, again, to get, it's almost like dating for those of us who may be in the dating field. Orientation, think of it as your first date. You really have to impress that person to want to come back again to go to, dun, 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 dun. Oh, that didn't work because my computer didn't work. But the first date and then dun, 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 you go into the training phase of the relationship, right? So orientation, maybe you're getting coffee, and now the training is you're getting that full dinner. So that's what the training is, where you get all those details. And I know you all do training, so the volunteers know what to expect in that meal route. Again, orientation, it doesn't have to be that complicated. That might be something that we look at a statewide orientation, just video. If that's something you all are interested in, I might be able to work with Kita on that. Man, I'm coming up with some good ideas I have not run by my supervisor. Just throwing them out there. Maybe they'll stick, maybe they won't. But something to just do an overview of the program that you all can use to share. One way to help retain your volunteers is to know what motivates them to volunteer, right? There is a fun survey. I love personality tests. I love all these kind of survey things. Just took your love language quiz. Like, I'm that person, right? So I sent this to Kita, and Kita's going to send it to you all in the follow-up with all these materials. But it's called the Functional Approach to Volunteer Motivations. It's about a 30-question kind of quiz, survey, whatever you want to call it. And you rank all of these questions. They'll ask you a question. You rank it from a scale of 1 to 7, 1 being not important to me, 7 being most important. It will make sense once you get it, not how I'm explaining it. But the results will tell you which one of these functions a volunteer is. So this is something cool to maybe do during an orientation, or if you have veteran volunteers that have been around for a while, just to get them to know them a little bit more. So you have values, understanding, enhancement, career, social, and protective. So maybe your college students are going to be more in a career function, like they're volunteering so they can get experience in the workplace, like field experience to put on a resume. So that way you know, okay, I'm going to have this volunteer for a year. I'm going to try and use them as much as I can based on ours and their schedule. And then I know probably a letter of recommendation is going to be a benefit or an expectation for this volunteer. Social. We have a lot of volunteers who like to volunteer to make friends. They don't have a big social circle. They're new in town. A recent retiree who usually has all their friends at work, but now they're not going to work all the time. They want a new friendship circle. So they're going to volunteer and try and meet new people. So okay, this person has a social function that's important to them. Maybe I match them up with a veteran volunteer that they can deliver meals together so they can get to know one another, something along those lines. So that's kind of how that can help retain those volunteers if you know what their motivations are. Super fun. I think you all should do it too. Just saying. Kind of going back to training a little bit. If you have a good training, volunteers are going to, one, retain the information and then have a better performance, right? So I love, you've all probably heard this before, but didn't know that it was called the Dale's Cone of Experience. Basically, it goes in order. What you read, hear, and see, that's the 10, 20, and 30%. But if you combined, so like what you see and hear, you're going to remember and retain 50% of. What you say and write, so those people who love to take diligent notes, are going to remember 70% of what you train them on. But if you're able to do actual hands-on training with these volunteers, they're going to remember 90% of what they do. Now, I'm still a huge Grey's Anatomy fan. Love that show. I know it's been on forever. But one thing that they always talk about in Grey's Anatomy, or at least used to, is the learn one, do one, teach one. That's how kind of the medical field does. So you learn a procedure, you learn a route, or you learn how to prep food or whatever it is. Then you do it. So, of course, you train them. Then they do it on their own. And then the volunteer teaches another volunteer how to do it. So they're getting all that kind of knowledge, that repetition, and then they become one of the experts. So as new volunteers come in, maybe you don't have to necessarily do the training. You have those seasoned volunteers who will come and do that training for you. Again, giving you more time and freeing you up to do other things. But as you're doing some trainings, try and think of how your training's going. Are you doing PowerPoints and making everybody listen to you? If you are doing PowerPoints, do you have vibrant images or is it very wordy slides? And then is there anything that you're able to let them do hands-on in that training to really grasp the concept of the information that you're wanting them to learn? Also, learning styles are super important. Oop, one too many. Also in the materials I'm going to give Kita is a learning styles assessment. Another good thing to have volunteers do maybe at orientation. So here's going to be our new quote unquote class of volunteers. And there's 10 of them. 7 of them have a result of the tactile kinesthetic learning style. That's your hands-on learning style. Okay, I need to make sure that with this next group, I'm doing some more hands-on activity. Or vice versa, we have auditory learners, people who love to hear things and they retain it. I'm an audible listener. I love listening to books. That helps me out. I can visualize things. Just hearing all that. If you have a majority of people who love to hear things, cool, just talk at them all day. And then you have our visual learners, those people who want to see what you're talking about, see those examples, see the data, nice, pretty vibrant things. Like you can notice a lot of my slides aren't very wordy. They have pictures and fun things, and hopefully you giggle even though I can't hear you. So having a mixture of all of these learning styles as well in your training is going to help the volunteer be more engaged and remember and retain the things that you're wanting them to remember as they go into their volunteer service. Supervision, not the most fun, flashy part of our job, right? But volunteers do need to be supervised. We need to make sure that they're delivering meals correctly or that they're actually delivering the meal, right? We don't want clients to call and say, hey, I haven't gotten a meal in a week. And you're like, oh my gosh, what on earth happened? So supervision can be formal, but most of the time with volunteers, it's going to be informal. So let's just do a check-in. We have a volunteer who just started. They've been on their meal route for a week. Maybe on Friday, we give them a call. Hey, we appreciate that you've delivered 3 meal routes this week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I just wanted to touch base and see how that went. Were there any issues? Did you notice anything, any concerns that you have? And just kind of have that short, sweet conversation. If you had a volunteer through that volunteer-a-thon or the volunteer ambassador that recruited that volunteer, maybe this informal supervision comes from them and they just check in on them. So just that little check-in. Maybe it's a small group. So you had a group of new volunteers, or just want to have a monthly kind of volunteer meeting to talk about anything that we may have issues with or trends that we're seeing. And instead of doing one-on-ones, you can get a group of 4 or 5 people together, and maybe they have similar issues and you can all talk and kind of resolve something. But having it, I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a conversation. It can be an email follow-up. It can be virtual meetings. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person, but just having those touch points, making sure that you're connecting with those volunteers in that way. Evaluation. Every year at least you want to evaluate your program. Usually now's around the time that we do the evaluations. How did the year go? How is we going to wrap up? Because something that not a lot of us do is celebrate. Like, oh my gosh, we've served more people than we did last year, than we ever have, delivered more meals, had more volunteers, whatever the yay, we're awesome moment is, celebrate, take the time, get your volunteers together, have an hour lunch, throw a party, whatever. Also, it's going to show us the areas we need to improve, right? Strengths and weaknesses, they both come hand in hand. Maybe we need a couple more volunteers in a really rural area that we need to improve on. Or volunteers have delivered more meals, but also the volunteers are traveling like twice as many miles as they did the year before. How can we retain our volunteers by cutting some of that mileage in half or lowering that mileage, wherever it is that you can improve upon. We're also going to show the impact. The number one thing volunteers want to know in terms of being recognized is what impact are they having? They don't care that they've worked 150 hours this week. They care that Miss Smith called Paula and said, I'm so thankful that Oscar came by today. He had a smile on his face. I was having a down day. He didn't know about it, but just him asking how I was just brightened my day. That's what volunteers want to know about, whether it comes from you or it comes from the client. We also need to evaluate our program as a whole, again, at your local level, your regional level, and at the state level. We have to evaluate ourselves. Are we doing a decent job? Are we making those touch points with those volunteers? Could we improve on that, a little bit? Do volunteers feel comfortable coming to me? When my supervisor asks me for data, is it something I can easily pull, or is it going to take me a day to figure out how to pull all that data? Some things to consider when evaluating. And then, of course, we evaluate our volunteers. This will come in the form of those informal kind of discussions. It can be through a survey, it can be through focus groups. However you want to do your evaluation, you can go as in-depth or kind of a simple survey may suffice. But just to get that input, get that evaluation going and see how we can improve for 2025. I'm considering doing a statewide survey. So this is something I want your all's input on. So if you've zoned out, checking emails, do me a favor, come back just for a minute because I need your input on this one. What I'm hoping to do is a statewide volunteer satisfaction survey. And you all may do satisfaction surveys. Let me know. Do you all do volunteer satisfaction surveys at your level? Thumbs up, give me a yes in the chat, something along those lines. But I want to do this for all of our volunteer programs because we've never had this type of statewide data. Awesome. Stacy looks like she does. And so does Amy. Perfect. So I want to do this for all of our programs. You all have been so gracious in contributing to the annual volunteer impact report. And this survey is some of the data that I want to put in there as well. So I want to collect that demographic data, kind of ranking questions. How satisfied are you with your volunteer experience? All sorts of questions like that. Haven't fleshed it out to all the questions yet, just kind of getting the broad strokes. How's training and preparation going? Do we need to improve in our training at all? What's your favorite part of volunteering? What's your least favorite part of volunteering? Some people will say training is my least favorite part. We're not going to ever get rid of our training, right? That's a very key part to our volunteer programs. Ways the programs can improve. And probably one of the most important things I want to get from our volunteers is those stories and those testimonials, because we can use those so much. We can use those in our recruitment efforts. We can use those in our storytelling when we have newspaper articles. We can do so much with the stories and testimonials that we get from our volunteers. So if there's anything in particular that you want to know from your volunteers if we do this statewide survey, please let me know. Type it in the chat, shoot me an email privately if you want to do that. But I really would like to get your all's input. If this is something, one, that you would be willing to send out to your volunteers, that's going to be key because you all will be who I need this to go out to. Thank you, Keita, for putting my email in the chat. And if there's anything you want to know from your volunteers, please let me know. We'll see if we can include that in the survey. Recognition. Oh, man, this hour's gone by super fast. Okay. There's a huge data disconnect. Again, we're talking recognition, but recognition also correlates with retention, right? If you don't recognize your volunteers, they're going to leave. They're going to be like, they don't care that I'm here. They're not even telling me thank you. So this is a huge part of retention is recognition. Big data disconnect. Mentioned this a little earlier. The top two things volunteers want in terms of recognition. One is know their impact. That's why I created the volunteer impact report and I separated it out by program. So you can tell your volunteers, this is how many people we served, how many meals, all those good data points. Thank yous. Even a simple, thank you so much for doing this meal route. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for talking to Miss Smith like you did and getting some concerns and some of the resources that she may need. Not only coming from you, but like we talked about earlier, coming from staff, coming from upper management. Thank yous just from other volunteers. Thank yous from the clients. So encouraging clients, hey, when the volunteer comes, delivers your meal, make sure you say thank you if at all possible. It would be awesome in an ideal world, I think during Volunteer Appreciation Week or Thanksgiving or something along those lines. I had this idea, wasn't able to do it. I have so many ideas. But give your clients, when they do like a letter, a thank you note, a blank thank you note. And I don't know how, again, logistics is something I got to work out, but kind of incognito, ask the clients to write a thank you note to the person who delivered them the meal. That's going to mean so much to that volunteer that they have a handwritten note, or they can do it verbally, whatever is easiest for them. But like that token, that memento that they can take home and say, oh my gosh, Miss Smith took time out of her day to write me this note and thank me for what I'm doing. I'm never going to leave this volunteer opportunity. In fact, I want another meal route. Again, ideal world. But something along those lines I think would be really, really impactful for volunteer recognition. The two things that volunteers like the least are big banquets and putting the spotlight on them. So not saying don't ever do these things, but if you have a big gala or something along the lines of like a dinner or something to recognize volunteers, maybe you've seen a decline in attendance. If you haven't, great. If it's working for you, don't fix what's not broken, right? And then having that spotlight, some volunteers love the spotlight. They want that recognition, but some are a little bit more shy in that area. Another thing that's important with recognition is keeping it going. This has to be an all year round thing. This can't just be for that 1 week in April or around the holidays. So the culture of appreciation is a priority. Making sure the staff and volunteers know that we want to be sure you all feel thanked and appreciated, and that we're thanking and appreciating each other. And modeling it from the top down. You all are at the top. Asking your supervisors, asking the board, make sure that whenever you see volunteers that you're thanking them so they see that from the top down. And make it easy. Appreciation and recognition does not have to be hard. A simple thank you doesn't take a whole lot of time. Writing a note, something, well, here we go. These are some of the easier, more cost-effective, not super labor-intensive ideas for recognition. Again, recognition and retention kind of going hand in hand. So we love a good thank you note. We all know how to write those. A happy birthday card. A volunteer is more than like treat them like a person. Hey, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Congratulations. Happy anniversary. Did you know that you've been a volunteer for our program for 5 years? And do you know that what the impact you've had? And jot down some notes about that volunteer. Check out how many people that they've served, how many meals that they've delivered. If a client has given a compliment, refer to that compliment and just kind of think of it that way. Could be an email. A card's always nice too, though. Volunteer spotlight, the thing that I just said volunteers don't like. I don't mean to contradict myself, but totally just contradicted myself. But for those volunteers who want to be spotlighted. If it's a volunteer appreciation week, ask volunteers, hey, if you want to be showcased on our social media, send me a picture, give me a quote. The people who want to be in the spotlight will respond. The people who don't won't. So you're giving them that option on how they want to be recognized. Coffee with the coordinator or tea or whatever you want to call it. This was something that a lot of coordinators did during COVID because you couldn't really have those volunteer opportunities, but you still wanted to engage and retain those volunteers. Hey, we're going to get on a virtual meeting. Bring your own drink of choice. We're going to talk about things. I'm going to give you some updates, and then we'll talk amongst ourselves, see if there's any issues going on, any updates. Informal learning, if you are required to do any kind of update training or anything like that with the program, this non-alcoholic drinks, yep, very good. Just kind of informal learning, a little bit of an update. It's also a good time to remind them, hey, I have some paperwork I need you to fill out. We need to update your conflict of interest. We need you all to sign whatever it is we might need you to sign. So instead of having a bunch of paperwork, sending a bunch of emails, having this maybe once a month, once a quarter, just to check in, might save you some time on the paperwork front in the future. Candygrams, love these. I see these at trainings all the time, especially orientations and the first day of training. Just a thank you with a little piece of candy and a fun little cheesy note. I love a good cheesy note. Lifesavers, you're a lifesaver. You're worth more than 100 grand, but unfortunately I have no money to pay you. You know, you bring us joy, and then you have an almond joy. Things of that nature are just little fun things that you can try and do. This is really a good welcoming for new volunteers. Like, oh my gosh, this is fun. I got a little gift from them, and I haven't even done anything yet. Spell it out appreciation. These I think are really fun. So some of our senior centers, I've seen them do this before during National Volunteer Appreciation Week. Sidewalk chalk. So the main way you get into the building has a big thank you to volunteers. There's an appreciation board or gratitude board, so where you can put sticky notes, or if you have cork board, you can say what you're thankful for, who you're thankful for, and why you're thankful for them. If this is in, let's say you're in a facility, senior center, whatever your nutrition site is, people will come and look at this board and be like, oh my gosh, I want to volunteer for this organization. Look at how much fun stuff that they do and how appreciative they are of their volunteers. I was at a conference a few years ago, and they had the bubble letters of thank you, and you wrote in, what are you thankful for? So kind of doing a big thank you and appreciation like that, where you fill in the letters on things you're appreciative of. And there's countless more ideas. All of these things, the Volunteer Australia, the 52 appreciation ideas, and the recognition toolbox, I've all sent to Kita, and she's going to send that to you all. And I'm going to stop talking because I have about 30 seconds left. Stayed technically within my hour. But if you all have any questions, comments, anything that you want to discuss, please feel free to reach out. I love talking about volunteers. Happy to do it all day, every day. Just let me know how I can help. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Sydney. This was amazing information and way more than I anticipated you giving out to everyone. So I greatly appreciate it. I am going to stop the recording. Hold on. Hold, please. Okay, so the recording has stopped.